Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next episode of Overwatch.
The Toronto Defiant will not be denied.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Made in Esports. I am one of your quote-unquote hosts. Spencer. With me is Chris. Today,
are you a quote-unquote host, or are you a real host?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit different, right? Like, is this just a regular podcast? Is this a video? You know what I'm trying to say? Because we usually try to keep these ones a little bit shorter. So with that being said, now that you've killed my train of thought, Chris, thank you very much. We're here to talk about a crazy week one in the Overwatch League landscape, really, if you will. If you guys are again fans of the Overwatch League, it was a crazy one, to put things lightly, right? Scrimbucks Exchange going through the roof, people buying, people selling. Yeah, well, they crashed, but at the same time, the Houston Outlaws beat the San Francisco Shock. So, I mean, at some point, you know, some stocks were worth buying and some were worth selling. So we're just here to kind of give a quick little recap on the Scrimbucks Stock
I'm buying
Exchange.
Defiant Coin. Check out my new website, defiantcoin.com, where I make Toronto Defiant Bitcoins.
Chris, we put Defiant at 5. We've already bought the Defiant coin, right? If anybody else needs, I'm holding mine. We don't need to buy anymore. We already have them.
Wait, this is the best they're doing all season. I'm selling it now. Selling it while it's
Yeah,
hot.
facts. You're going to sell while it's high. That's funny. So yeah, before we get into it, guys, again, if you enjoyed the content, please like, please subscribe. Leave us a comment down below. Which performance surprised you the most? I don't want to say impressed the most, but surprised you the most. Was it the LA Gladiators going 0-2? Was it the Dallas Fuel looking like the team people thought they were going to be at earlier in the year? You know, was it the Houston Outlaws beating the San Francisco Shock? Atlanta Reign getting mentally boom. There was a lot of cool storylines this weekend. Let us know which ones were your personal most surprising ones down below. And then we'll kind of jump right into, I guess, just our thoughts on Scrimbucks and sort of what we saw this weekend. I just want to preface this conversation a little bit by saying, I feel like this happens every year. I'm always surprised by how many people put so much stock into Scrimbucks. Like, I think putting weight onto it is important, but like basing your entire power rankings off of it, we've seen time and time again off like one meta, especially in Overwatch and scrims, just doesn't make any sense. It very rarely truly holds up. I always say what you should do is, you know, do your power rankings preseason, then do your power rankings with Scrimbucks, and then sort of weight them. You know what I mean? Maybe 80% preseason, 20% power rankings, take that aggregate, and that way you kind of like, you can like use the Scrimbucks to maybe break a tier, but I wouldn't build my whole ranking upon them. So that's my personal thought. How about yourself, Chris? And we can kind of get into what we saw this weekend.
I feel like you just make that Scrimbucks power ranking just so you can feel good inside, and then you toss it out the window.
Well, there's some, I wouldn't say toss out the window. We saw some like indicative performances. Like the Houston Outlaws were talked about as being this really good team. Happy's going to pound according to Yiska, and then what happens? You know, Happy comes out, absolutely pounds. So
Yeah, no, there are some good ones. I feel like Scrimbucks is good for predicting diamonds in the rough, and also, you know, maybe placing teams in their, you know, top bracket or lower bracket, but I can't say anything beyond that, especially because it's way too early too. But I feel like there were one thing, you know, I really liked about this weekend, Spencer, is that I feel like, to me, it indicated that there may be less of a skill gap between the top teams and the bottom teams than was last year. Like, I couldn't expect, you know, Vancouver to really, you know, take a map, you know, let alone get some good team fight wins off of, you know, really many teams at all, especially in the higher tiers last year. But this year, you know, they got some decent team fight wins versus, you know, Mayhem, and although they lost pretty heavily, it wasn't like sweep after sweep, and they beat Toronto on a map, and albeit we had, you know, Logix and Beast in there, but to me, you know, we're seeing some of the low-level teams like still have like some pretty decent performances, and I like to see that.
I think that'll change a little bit as the meta becomes more defined. But I think we always thought that mid-tier was a lot of teams. Like, I still think the big three are going to be Washington, San Francisco Shock, and LAG. I think that will eventually, they will sort of separate themselves from the pack, assuming Dallas Fuel doesn't get, I think, a true hit scan in there. I think if they get a true hit scan, they've shown they can win without it, then maybe they sort of put themselves in that top 4 position that we were sort of thinking they may be. But I do expect the teams like the Houston Outlaws, the Toronto Defiance, the Atlanta Reigns, the Florida Mayhems, the Boston Uprisings, to really be competitive all year long and then be able to push those teams, those top teams, on any given night, depending on the meta, right? You've seen it. If it's a rush meta, Atlanta Reign can perform. If it's, double bubble, like Toronto Defiant looked really strong in that particular meta. Like Atlanta Reign, OGE looked pretty decent throughout the year, right? That support line looks as deadly as ever. So, I think you will start to see the Shocks and the Gladiators and the Washington Justices pull away a little bit as people become more perfected with the meta. But again, I think it's important to highlight a few teams, specifically with the Scrimbucks, that like really impressed me or surprised me is a better way to put it this weekend.
Yeah, I understand that. And before that, it is kind of cool to say that every single character was played this weekend. Every single one, even we had our Bastions. I know we saw some of that there. But it feels like there's a couple different metas that were kind of popping out. There's Rush with like Ryan Diva. We didn't see a whole lot of Ryan Zarya, I don't think. And although I like that, I still like seeing the Ryan Diva because I think Diva is good at challenging.
We actually saw more Ryan Sigma than we did.
Ryan Sigma too, yeah. And then we saw Double Bubble, which is really nice. I honestly like watching Double Bubble play because it makes me consider how I can be a better monkey. And then like Ball Zarya, and that's like for me that's not a fun comp to watch.
Yeah, but it obviously was effective at certain points. So let's just jump right into this. There was a lot of viability, but that usually happens. Everyone's always surprised, like, oh man, this patch is different. Every comp is viable. I'm like, eventually the best teams figure it out. It happens every year where it seems viable at the beginning of the stage or beginning of the year, right? And then teams start to put things together, and all of a sudden there becomes a defined meta. But I think the team that really impressed me the most was the Houston Outlaws. And this is like, if you're a Scrimbucks fan, this is your saving grace, right? You are like riding and dying in the Houston Outlaws because that was the team that I think a lot of people, ourselves included, had relatively low in the power rankings. Although I will say, obviously, Yissa came on the show and hyped up Happy. So if you didn't see that clip, we tweeted that one out. Yeah. You should follow us on Twitter. But I did go on the record saying that I think this tank line is being underrated substantially by a lot of people throughout the community, and I think they showed why. Picky and I can't remember, John Gu. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I did, but anyways, you know who I'm talking about. Performed really well. Looked really talented in that role. The communication was on point. Juby looked impressive for the record, and then obviously Dante and Happy kind of come in there and do their thing. That's going to be a team to watch. If they can keep up this momentum. I don't know if they will. But that was a really impressive one, especially beating the team like the Shock. I know they kind of almost gave it away at the end there by letting the Shock come back. But hey, they were able to ice in their veins. They were able to close it out. And not only that, but they also beat the Dallas Fuel, which a lot of people said 3-2. Maybe not that impressive. But the Dallas Fuel comes out there and smokes LAG and looks great while doing it. And all of a sudden, maybe you put a little more stock into that Houston win, right? So Houston really came out there and started defending the Scrimbucks. It was impressive.
Yeah, I know. But also, big shout to some of the people on SF. Honestly, Violet, at least in their game previously, man, when he flexed to McCree, he was one of the top McCrees in the league to me. He was just pinging people in the dome every single time. I wish I came up with the stats from it. Should have gone to StatsLab before this, but I may after and just take a look at, hey, what did he do when he was playing McCree?
Yeah, and it's also not like he's doing that against a random team, right? He's doing that versus their match versus the LA Gladiators. So that was a really impactful match. Yeah. That was an important match for him to come out there and perform like that. Is very impressive. But maybe let's get into the meat of the things here on some of the teams that underperformed their Scrimbucks. You know what I mean? People are selling the stonks. I think the first one to really bring up, since we just talked about it, is the LA Gladiators. This is like one of those teams that I think a lot of people are kind of low on the Gladiators, but I wouldn't be too low on them yet. I think they'll figure it out. They lost to two really talented teams in the Dallas Fuel and the San Francisco Shock. And while I was surprised that they lost to Dallas Fuel, especially considering they don't have a hit scan, the Dallas Fuel early on are still a very talented team, right? I think a lot of people, or maybe ourselves included, underrated them, but this team on paper should be an elite team, and they don't have that tracer play, they don't have that hit scan, but they found ways to work around it, and when they worked around it, you really saw the rest of their lineup really come to fruition with like Fearless looking absolutely elite, Hanbin, one of the best off tanks in the world. So I'm low on the Gladiators, but I personally think that they can bounce back, and I think by the end of the year they will still be in that top 4, top 5 discussion.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like they will bounce back. It's a tough loss. Although I honestly, like I said, I didn't have them at number 1 or number 2.
We had them at 3.
We had them at 3. So didn't have them too high. I'm interested to see. I know Moth and Shoot on paper is a pretty deadly backline. I'm interested to see how Moth performs without like the elite tier of the San Francisco Shock playing around him.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep my eye a little bit more on that because I feel like played decently over the weekend, but was by no means San Francisco Moth that I remember yet. Once again, new team,
Yeah. I think part of that. Sorry, I was cutting you off. I think that there's some. I think I'm confident in Moth and what he's able to do. Will he be the MVP? Maybe not, but I still think he's going to be, again, one of the better main sports in the league. To me, it was, and we said this when Yiska was on the show, there were some question marks with this team, and that people, I think, just wrote away. People just assumed that the bird ring of playoffs was going to be the bird ring we saw all year, which I said maybe wasn't going to be the case, right? I think Muse and Space, well, can reach some pretty high highs, definitely are not this like surefire elite tank line that a lot of people are making them out to be. And I think they will bounce back, and I think they'll figure out that communication as Muse gets a little bit more comfortable. But, some people will say that it was Muse 1A, or sorry, Mag 1A, Muse 1B, but I don't think it was necessarily that close. I do think that this tank line might show some cracks. And again, with the Bird Ring and Mirror and Kevstar on ping, definitely some question marks. If Kevstar comes over to the States and you get him off ping, do they start to turn it around? Maybe. But with this backline, I just think there's too much talent here for them not to, again, be a top 5 team. But people who have them number 1, I always thought they were sort of, drinking the Scrimbucks Kool-Aid a little bit too much on that one.
Yeah, Bird Ring, everybody has that recency bias of playoffs Bird Ring, but, you can't remember, like, regular season Bird Ring was very, icy cold or red hot. I do want to give a shout to an APAC game I watched, Fusion versus Seoul. Just for a couple reasons. I mean, like, they're two teams that are fairly close. We did rank them quite closely, but to me, like, Philly had a very convincing win over Seoul, and they were missing like 4 people. And we can argue, they're missing, I think, Funny Astro, Poco Ikuo, Shockwave. And you can like argue that Hobta is still really good. Obviously, Carpe Rascal is still pretty elite. Toby Alarm.
Yeah, they still have a good team on paper, but you're right, they overperformed.
But to me, they really overperformed. Like
my expectations.
Like
that's just my expectations.
Yeah. Like just in terms of like, hey, how much time they actually spent working together. Everybody's had a whole off season. They had a little less time because they just have been running into these issues recently.
Yeah.
They like very convincingly beat Seoul. Like Seoul took 1 map, I think, off of them.
Yep.
And it was just it was, they won it by the skin of their teeth. It was like Rialto, final point, like Philly picks like 2 or 3, then somehow Seoul comes back and like picks 4 and wins it. It was crazy. I loved watching it, but I think that it's a good shout to Philly, even though that these two teams aren't too far apart in the rankings.
Yeah. I watched that game too. It was the one and only APAC game that I watched, and I agree. Yeah. Philly really impressed me. I didn't think they would still be a good team because I knew that Toby, Hotba, and Rascal were good pieces. But I agree that I expected them to lose to Seoul because Seoul was hyped coming in. They were a top 4 team last year. They made some improvements, and it was not what we saw initially. So I still think Seoul can turn it around. But this Philly team could low-key be dangerous. Mono looked great again, so I'm excited to see how that team sort of puts it together. Let's get into the final one I want to bring up here, and that was the Atlanta Reign versus the Toronto Defiant. This was the Atlanta Reign stonks were already being sold. They were reaching all-time lows. And then they were up 2-0, and all of a sudden, you know what I mean? I could see some people on the stock exchange. They were buying it back. They were trying to get their receipts in order, and then Toronto Defiant comes back and hits a reverse sweep. Not only is that Atlanta Reign sort of declining, but that's also a Toronto Defiant stonks soaring because a lot of people have them pretty low. That was a really interesting game. What were some of just the high-level points that you wanted to bring up there, Chris?
Yeah, well, I think from my standpoint, I want to talk maybe about the inflection point in between the first 2 games and the third one. I feel like it's kind of funny because, the first 2 games and the last 3 ones. I feel like it's the Dorado is an interesting inflection point because it kind of represents a shift from Toronto being kind of shaky but winning it, and then like pretty convincingly winning the next 2. And I think the biggest changes here were just literally Toronto Defiant being able to read the Atlanta Reign and literally Lastro and Ansoon J just working better together.
Yeah.
I think those are the 2 key issues. We were trying to run rush against them first 2 comps. like really unsuccessfully. There's a lot of like communication issues. Then we just play like double bubble for the most part, as well as freaking ball and
Sorry.
Zarya, and we were able to kite speed boost engages, and it just worked. And they didn't have an answer to that.
Yeah, I'll say that we definitely. I mean, we tried the double bubble in Blizzard World, right? Defense, and we still got kind of rolled over. But it was a tale of two halves. I wonder how much, and we talked about this, before the show, how much sort of impact potential like KDG at halftime might have had he been able to like I don't know how, if he gave like a really good halftime speech, or if there was something specifically that they saw during Atlanta Reigns gameplay that really helped, or like they told the Defiant players that really enabled them to really have that comeback, because it looked like they were reading the rush comp and the pressure a lot better. Lastro also had a really shaky first two maps in terms of being caught out of position. And again, I don't know if that's on Lastro. I don't know if that's on Ansanjay for not peeling for him, or Michelle for not peeling for him, or just overall bad like pre-dive setups. I'm not sure what the actual reason was for that, but he was getting picked first an incredible amount. And then you sort of saw Ansanjay play much more with him. Michelle peeling better for him as the maps progress, and all of a sudden you start to see the impact that Lastro can have. And in fact, if we actually look at the IBM Watson power rankings, Lastro finished 4th of any player over the whole weekend. He was actually the second most impactful, support. So he looked really good. Sato and the Monkey looked amazing. Sato kind of fed a few moments, personally. I feel like Sato and the other team were just on a little bit of a different speed. Like Sato was just like a notch ahead in terms of like the pace he wanted to play at. There's a few times where I felt like he needed to either slow it down a little bit so the rest of the team could catch up, or vice versa. Maybe the rest of the team needed to speed up and match his pace. But overall, it created a ton of space, and we were able to capitalize on that space and sort of get some picks. And again, you saw the mechanical skills, dude. His monkey promos were insane. I love that moment on Anubis. I think was a really big turning point for this team for this match, where they had Atlanta had 6 minutes on the clock. Hisu swaps to Sombra. Then you had Sato Monkey, right? Michelle Zarya, Ana Lash Rosana, Hisu Sombra, like all of the characters on their best roles. Nice Echo, and everybody was just absolutely farming. Nice had some weird duplicates, but I thought his Echo was actually really impressive. Nice actually impressed me that game. I know some people were low on him because I felt like he kept duplicating the diva, and it kind of triggered me. But his mid fight were really good, and his Tracer was actually really impressive too. I thought Logix was going to be the clear Tracer player for this team. I actually don't know if that's going to be the case. It might be communication, but Nice's Tracer looked actually really clean. So, the whole team looked good. I like to see their communication pick up. I think there was definitely moments where the team was on separate pages, but they can really get together and build that team chemistry. You saw it in the Atlanta Reign match. Toronto can be that top 5, top 6, top 7 team that we told everyone they could be, and I think you saw it this match.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it's also important to note here that with the meta not quite well defined yet, this allows people to, play comfort picks and be able to get value out of it. I think we saw that with Hisu's Sombra. Not sure if she's, meta or not, but we haven't seen her a lot in other games, I don't think.
Yeah.
We saw that with Carpe's. I think Carpe was playing, Tracer.
Sparkle was running Doom a lot, to be fair, right? Like Sparkle was just making it work.
Did he play Genji at some point? He may have played Genji too.
He played Doom, and I know they here in Doha played Soldier for Dorado.
We've seen a lot of these cover picks, and I feel like that may also be a reason why we're seeing maybe traditionally lower ranked teams with more rigid players that don't have as big of a breadth of hero pools do well, because they can just flex to these cover picks and perform. But that may change as the meta gets more defined.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to leave you with one final question. You have to buy one stock and sell one stock. And that doesn't mean like you can sell high. You could think somebody overperformed these first 2 games and buy low. Who are you buying and who are you selling? I'm trying to think of my answers right now, too.
I mean, can't say Toronto fine because I bought those stocks.
Yeah, we own them.
Like the way my whole life savings is in those stocks.
Yeah.
I am honestly going to. Oh man, this is a hard question. You're really getting me here.
Yeah. I'm also trying to look at APAC too, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking at APAC, like which one's which. I'm going to sell Soul. purely because of how badly they got slapped by Philly with a half a roster.
Yeah, it's not a bad call, actually. Seoul was one that we put pretty high.
We ranked them pretty high.
And there was question marks. I was actually low on Seoul last year. But you're right. That core is still there. That's still a team that's going to like randomly turn up and win tournaments. And then other tournaments like low-key underperform.
I just don't want volatility in my portfolio.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair enough.
I never bought LA stonks, so I don't need to I'm not going to buy those.
Well, you could still in theory sell them. You might think they were lower than a top 3 team. I don't personally, but
no, I got to see a little bit more from them. Maybe let's go ahead and buy some Dallas Fuel stocks. We will rate them pretty lowly. I mean, Spencer did, and
they don't have a hit scan. I stand by that. They don't have a hit scan. Like both of us were like, this team would be higher if they had a hit scan, but it's hard to rank them in that top 7 when they like don't have a hit scan or a tracer player. Like I think I was actually going to sell Dallas Fuel. I think Dallas will come back down to earth once teams figure out the meta. Like if the meta becomes like McCree Echo, which is what a lot of teams try to run, like you can play Doom all you want, but teams are going to figure out how to counter it. My sell was actually going to be Dallas Fuel. I think that this team is riding off of a really good 2-week performance and 3-1 in the Gladiators. I think they'll come back down to earth. It depends where you have their stocks. But I would sell those. Debatably Houston. I think they're a little too high on them, but they're obviously a pretty good team.
Yeah, okay. I can see those too. Like it's really hard. Like I'm not gonna buy Florida, Houston, like Toronto, I'm not gonna buy.
I might buy Atlanta stocks. I'm actually gonna go on a hot take here. I want to buy Atlanta Reign. I think that people are like automatically assuming that Atlanta Reign once again is a bad team. And this might be a hot take, but I will say this.
It's a hot take.
People are. It depends how low you have Atlanta Reign. People are assuming that because Atlanta lost the first 2 games of the season, that this is like the overrated Atlanta team of last year, and they very well might be. But I will say this: they lost to the Florida Mayhem, and they lost a very close 3-2 to the Toronto Defiant. Both Toronto and Florida were in our top 5, I believe. I believe Toronto was number 5. So like, yeah, losing 2 games sucks, but they're also 2 of the best teams in NA, in my opinion. It's not like they got 3-2 reverse swept by Paris, right? So I still would favor Atlanta over a lot of these different teams. It depends how many people are selling. If I get them at a low enough price, I actually would buy Atlanta right now. I think they're still going to be a top 7 team in NA once it's all said and done.
Okay, I hear you loud and clear there. That sounds good. Well, hey guys, like this episode, please comment, subscribe, like to Made in Esports. Let us know what your thoughts are below. What was your favorite matchup and what was the biggest surprise to you?
And as always, guys, thank you for watching and enjoy.